We're really lucky to have Matt come back and share his experience of what it was like setting up a squat practice. So this is actually going to be recorded to go out on the Squat Success podcast, so you guys can listen back to it later on. So the way we'll do it is we'll talk for the next half an hour, 45 minutes, and Matthew will share everything about his journey and what he's been through. Off the back of that, at the end, there will be some time for Q&As. So Matthew will be here tomorrow as well. So you can ask him anything you want about setting up in practice. He's brought some stuff from his practice today as well.
I'm staying in the hotel tonight, so if you're free and you want to grab a beer, I'm going to be down in the Bacchus bar later on, probably having a pint. So if you want to come and have a chat with me about it, if you've got any questions, you want me to pick my brains, then feel free. I'm around.
Thank you, Matthew, for coming back.
I love how I get my Sunday name Bobby as well. So my mum and Caroline, and now Bobby calls me Matthew.
Matthew. We've got a few Matts in the group, so it gets a bit confusing. Yeah. So, no, thank you. So if we just rewind a little bit, we actually went to university together. You were in the year above me.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And never really knew each other properly until you reached out off the back of Squat Success. So if you just want to give an introduction to the group, so I know some people know you, some people don't, but it'd be great for everybody to get a bit of background, who you are, what your journey was, how did you land into dentistry?
Yeah, so my name's Matt, I'm from Blackpool, so I went to Birmingham University, qualified in 2012. Loved uni, it was a great time when I was at Birmingham. And then when I finished uni, I went back to my hometown, Blackpool, did my VT year in a NHS dental practice. And then I got an associate job there and I worked there for another 4 years. So I spent 5 years in the National Health Service, and then an opportunity came along and I went into a fully private practice. So completely left the NHS, working on that one day, and the next day I was fully private. And that was a really big move for me. I felt really not very confident about that. I didn't know if I'd be good enough to do that. And I remember the dentist who was taking over just said to me, I went for a chat with them just for a coffee, and they just said, you're doing everything that I do. It sounds like you're doing everything the same. The only difference is you'll have a lot more time with people. So I really enjoyed working in that practice. That was a private practice. I was there for 5 years again. There came a point where, I think that was during COVID, or lockdown, and I was just a bit bored at home. And I thought, what can I do? I had a load of photos. I'd started taking a lot of photography, a lot of pictures of my work. And I thought, what can I do with all this? And I made a Instagram account. I did a couple of competitions when life comes back to normal. I'm going to do a tooth whitening giveaway. And obviously everyone was at home at that time, and they went really crazy really quickly. So I managed to gain quite a quick following on Instagram within a couple of months really. And then when I was returning to work, I was in a position where I had a kind of a bit of almost a personal brand. And then from that, I managed to do quite a lot of work with Invisalign, a lot of work with composite bonding, a lot of cosmetic work. I got to a point in that practice where I kind of felt like I'd outgrown it a little bit. I mean, I loved working there. The bosses were amazing, and it was a really good place to work. But I kind of felt like I was bringing in a lot of patients myself. There were a lot of people coming in specifically to see me. And I just asked them if there was a possibility of maybe having a little bit of a difference in my associate split. That didn't work out for them, it didn't work out for me. And then I was approached and went to work in another practice in Preston. And I was there for around nearly 2 years. I was on a really good associate split there. And it was a really good job. But then just in the back of my mind, I've never really kind of felt about, will I ever own my own dental practice? People were asking me that, like, would you do it? I was like, no, I'm quite happy. At this point, I was doing a master's degree, so I just finished a master's in restorative dentistry. I had a little boy on the way, and I was like, no, there's enough going on in my life. I'm quite happy being an associate. I'm making good money. Everything's going well. I can leave my job and I can go home and just chill in the evenings. But then the more I was at this practice I was working at last, there was certain things going on, and I just felt, if I had a dental practice, I would do that a little bit differently. And that kind of kept growing inside of me. Like, I would probably do that a little differently. And then just by chance, my wife had always said to me, if a building comes up in our local area, I live in a place called Polton-le-Fylde, which is a little market town near Blackpool. And she said to me, if the building ever comes up in this market square, that would make a really good dental practice. Should we do it? And it just so happened, I think it was around Christmas time 2023, a building came up in the market square. It was for lease. And then I come across Bobby and I reached out to him and said, Bobby, I know you do a lot of help with dentists setting up squat practices. This building's come up. I might look into it. And he said, sure, let's have a look at it. We did a little video run through of it and I went round it and it was an absolute dive, this building. It was like the ceiling was almost falling in. It was on 3 floors. Like the top floor was a nightmare. It had like a bank vault in there and everything. And I thought, oh, what a shame. That would have made a really good dental practice, but it's just too much work and too much effort. But then the week after, another building came on a bit further down the road, and I was like, okay, let's try this one. I showed Bobby that one. He said maybe go with an equipment company. Got in touch with a guy called Simon Pierce, who's was from McKillop Dental. He came down with me on that day and looked around it, and I said to him, Simon, do you think this could be a dental practice? And he said, yeah, this would make an amazing dental practice. It was a case of hit the ground running and spoke to Bobby about it. And at that time, bear in mind, I don't know what the majority of you are, where you're up to. I was just an associate and I knew nothing about business. I was just a dentist. I had a young family and I just thought I need to know what I'm doing here. I don't know anything about the way you go around it. I don't know anything about the building regulations, getting a builder, what's needed, CQC and all that. And that's why I joined Squat Success. And then Bobby basically gave me almost like a recipe book to follow and was like, Matt, do this, Matt, do this, Matt, do this. Have you done that? And that was really, really helpful to me, especially in those first few months, probably the January, February, March, where I had absolutely no idea. But I never felt like I was on my own. I was always very much like Bobby's on the end of the phone. And also I was in the WhatsApp group of the cohort of people who were setting up. And any questions, ping an idea into there, and people were just really helpful and supportive. That's probably the best thing about this group, is you've got that kind of safety net and you've got people just like wanting you to do well. It really is something that's priceless when you're setting up a practice.
Yeah, no, thanks for the summary, Matthew. That was brilliant. If we just rewind a little bit, so if we look at it a little bit deeper, you never really wanted to go into practice ownership or actually thought you're going to be a business owner. It's something that just kind of happened as a natural progression.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you get to a point in your career and you almost think like, I'm doing really well, but someone else is also doing really well off me. And as that goes on, it gets worse and worse and worse.
The reason why I ask this question is because this is one of the number one questions that I get asked, or I get told by other people in different communities. If you're an associate and you're making loads of good money, what is the benefit of opening your own practice? So if I'm making 250, 300 grand a year, I can put that money elsewhere, do whatever I want, and happy days. What is the point?
Well, I think there's 2 reasons. You've got to think of it as, rather than short-term gain, it's a long-term gain. So like, you're building something, you're building an asset. So come the end of the day when, I'm old and I'm going grey anyway because, work and kids and stuff. But there comes a point where you think, right, well, I've had enough of this now. I'm going to retire. And at the end of the day, you've got something physical that's you've built, and you've built from scratch, that you could potentially then sell on or pass on or whatever you want to do. So that's a big influencer in your decision. But also, I think it's just been like, if you think it was like a ship, like you want to be the captain of your ship in your life. Like, you don't want to go through life thinking, oh, I wish I'd done that, or having regrets. Like, you don't want to be like an old man on your deathbed and think, oh, if I'd done that, I wonder what would have happened. So that's always something to think about. But also being in control of your destiny, because you're only here once. So just take risks. But I say that, but there's ways of minimizing those risks, because building a squat practice is a massive risk. You're putting a lot into it, a lot of money, a lot of time. Everyone's going to be invested in that if you've got a family as well. So you need to try and keep those risks down as much as you possibly can. So one of them obviously is having the support network, but another thing is maybe thinking about your own personal branding and developing yourself first, because then that way you've already got a name for yourself, you're already a brand. And then putting that into a practice is a lot easier thing to do than not having that in the first place.
Yeah, so that's one of the big things that we talk about within Squat Success around personal branding. You built your personal brand so strong. So our journeys are completely different. I didn't have a personal brand within dentistry. Patients didn't know me. My journey of setting up my squat and how we built that has been completely different to yourself. But when I look back and reflect, knowing all the things that I know and seeing what happens in this community, if you like yourself, it's incredible to see the power of having that. When you're coming into the process much earlier on, you have a massive opportunity to do some of the things like what you've done, which have obviously propelled your business to levels that, you know, a lot of other people will never ever see, you know, when setting up a squat practice.
Well, I think like one of the most powerful things you can do like at the very, very start of any journey is just, you're never going to go wrong investing in yourself. Find something that you like doing, get really, really good at it, and then show other people that you can do it well, you know. So I always talk about like photography, clinical. I've got quite into photography and I spend thousands of pounds on cameras and stuff. You've got to make yourself like stand out and you've got to look good. And it's just finding something that you like doing and then getting really, really, really good at it and doing it well. So I think that's it's important.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. For the people who are listening to this and they're at maybe the beginning stage of the journey, how did you go about starting to build that personal brand? So I know you said you had a bit of time, you were bored during COVID and put stuff together. But for a lot of people, for whatever reason, there's loads of different things that stop them from posting, social media, putting themselves out there. How did you go about that process and how did you get over that?
I was never a fan of like shouting from the rooftops about myself, and I'm still not really a fan of it today, but I think you have to do that if you want to be visibly present and you want to show people what you can do. You've got to just get yourself out there, you've got to get your work on show, and you've got to just showcase yourself more and be proud of what you do, because every one of us does a great job.
Yeah, in other words, you've got to rip the plaster off.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
And then the more you do it, the easier it becomes over time. But like with anything, it's like a muscle. You know, you've got to keep using it to build it, to grow it and build that confidence. If we then go back into, you know, the process of setting up the squat, what did that journey look like? How was it? What were the kind of problems that you faced?
You know, I was quite fortunate in regards to the actual build and the going forward the practice. In regards to the builders were amazing. I had a really good build team who helped me, but I did it with like a turnkey company. So obviously you do pay a premium for that, but then you've got a company who have got the joiners, the electricians, the plasterers, the painters. They're all under one roof. I was still working at this time while building a practice, and I just used to go in on an evening after I finished work. What have they done today? And when you're in those early days, they tell you the first fix takes ages and you never see any progress, and you just see wires everywhere and it just looks like an absolute bomb site. But then as soon as like the plaster goes on the wall, it just all of a sudden just comes together so quickly. I mean, I look back on photos now, it was nearly a year that we opened, so it was the 15th of October 24 is when we got our CQC and we started seeing patients. And on the 13th of September 24, we had nothing. We had plastered walls and that was it. I mean, I was lucky in that sense. I mean, I did a leasehold for my premises, so it was I managed to get a 20-year lease, and I worked really closely with a guy called Amaddeep Nangla from Nexa Law, and he was fantastic. The only problem was he was an absolute stickler for details, so my lease took ages. He does dental leases all day long. He was dealing with a lease company or a solicitors who have no idea about dental leases, and we were getting hung up on stuff like, you know, we were putting X-ray units in. Well, the building's going to have radiation in there forever. And it's like, no, it won't. And like stuff like that, like they just couldn't understand certain things in dental leases that needed to be there and why do they need to be there. So it did take a lot of back and forth, but eventually it got over the line. Thankfully, my landlords are amazing. I've got just a couple of couples who have my building. So it wasn't them, it was more like the legality of it, and it just takes ages and it's really frustrating, because I remember there was a point where I just felt every week we were having these catch-ups on like Squat Success. Where are you at, Matt? And I was like, just the same as I was last week, you know? And it's like, you just want to get going with it. So that's a difficulty, but you've just got to, there's nothing you can do about that. It will just take its time, and you've got to think of it in the long run. I'm glad that lease is so watertight, because there's absolutely no comeback on anything. It's bomb-proof. So you never really know what the future is going to hold, but you want to make sure that you are protected for that. Yeah, I was lucky in that regard. You'll know more than anyone, Bobby. I had a very kind of turbulent time when I was leaving my associate position in my last practice.
Just before you talk about that, there's one question I want to ask first, and we'll get into that. But you never really wanted to be a practice owner in the beginning, But obviously you went through a process which then made you think, okay, this is going to be the right decision for me, and obviously now you don't regret that whatsoever. But what were the pain points that you were seeing in the practice where you were working, which ultimately pushed you then to take that plunge and to open your practice?
I run my practice very much like I steer it from the steering wheel. I make sure I'm there. I talked to Bobby about it and he says, you're nuts. But I'm always there first thing in the morning. I open up, I set the surgeries up. I'm always normally last person out the door. I'm always make sure that I'm approachable to the staff. I think when I was at my last practice, I kind of felt as an associate, I was doing a lot of that as an associate, and maybe the principal at the time maybe wasn't doing that, and that was kind of frustrating me a little bit, because it was only a very early setups practice, and I was like, this needs to be steered from the front. And again, it's like you come to a point in your career where you're like, I'm bringing a lot of people, they're coming in to see me specifically. I could really, not being big-headed, but I'm like, I could probably do this anywhere. I don't necessarily need to be in this practice to do that. And then you start thinking, well, maybe I could do it, maybe I could do my own thing. You probably won't do as much as I did. You do go into it with a bit of naivety, thinking, can't be that hard. And yeah, it is.
Famous last words.
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, like, it's probably the hardest thing I think I've ever done, but the best thing I've ever done. And that's the thing about it, like it's such like a double-edged sword. It's like you get such highs from it, and there's also real lows from it as well. And I think what makes a massive difference, so for me personally, like my wife's, she's part of the practice, and I just go home and I know I've got like a bit of a sort of support and someone can talk to about like, oh, what's the day been like? But hopefully as time goes on, you think you're riding more on the high, and you get to a point where you think, yeah, you know what, this is going really, really well. I'm really happy with how it's going. But there's still going to be days where you're like, oh, I don't know, that didn't go too great. That wasn't how I wanted it to be. It's a roller coaster, and you just got to strap yourself in and go for it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a huge amount of ups and downs. But then that brings me on to the next point, what you were about to talk about. And that's something that really comes down to resilience. So when you're building a business, growing a business, going down this journey, you do end up coming across an absolute ton of problems. And you went through some pretty horrific stuff. Everybody does. I did when I was setting up my practice. It's very, very few people that have a really smooth sailing journey. However, how you deal with that, how you manage that determines, how you will end up running your business afterwards, and you can utilize that to build another skill set. So that comes on to the point of, when you were setting up, you went through an horrific time.
Yeah, I did. I mean, there's been a lot of really low points in my kind of setup in my journey. But I do also think, like, I'm a big believer in like everything happens for a reason. Like, I would never have met Adrian if that hadn't have happened, because I remember when I was at probably my lowest point, I was getting letters through about we're going to sue you for X, Y, and Z. You're using photos that belong to our practice. I was like, oh, what is going on here? Like, I couldn't get my head around it. And I remember speaking to Bobby about it, and I was really kind of like low and upset. And Bobby just said, you need to speak to Adrian. Adrian knows GDPR. He'll help you. And he put me in touch with a solicitor who had some knowledge about it all. That's what really got me onto using, like CareStack. I mean, I'd never even heard of CareStack. And I think Adrian did me a deal where he basically said, I'll give you some GDPR advice if you come on a CareStack demo. And I used Dentally at this point. I was already signed up with Dentally, and I was like, yeah, Dentally's the way forward. I'd pay the deposit and everything, and I was all good to go. And I just went on this talk from CareStack and I thought, you know what, this looks amazing. And I thought, I'm just going to go with these guys. And my nurse at the time was like, you're an idiot. Like, why have you done this to us? We're a squat practice, because my dental nurse still works with me now. She'd been working with me for like 7 years. And I remember telling her, and her face just like dropped. And she says, I don't like it, Matt. It's awful. I said, no, stick with it. And now I was saying to Adrian, like, Yasmin, my treatment coordinator, is like CareStack guru. She knows like everything inside out. It's like Neo on the Matrix. You can like read the code and stuff. But you're looking at something like CareStack. This is the opportunity to look at a different software company. Don't just stick with what you know. You've got this opportunity where you can just put your own stamp on things. But the thing I like about CareStack is it's evolving constantly. So when I joined CareStack, I think I was like his 20th practice, and I thought CareStack was like an established thing in the UK. I thought it's been around for ages. Yeah, I've never heard of it, but it must be around. Apparently it wasn't. So it's obviously developed over time, and what the CareStack is today is nowhere like what CareStack was when it started.
Oh, yeah, it's radically different.
support
from
you
when
get.
we took it, compared to how it is now.
Yeah, they're so good and they've got so much support for you. So I don't get paid by CareStack, I pay them. But if anyone wants to talk to me about CareStack and VoiceStack, I use both.
Okay, yeah, no, brilliant, Matt. And then one of the other things I really wanted to ask, and I love exploring this with different dentists and seeing their journeys, how did you find the transition from going from an associate to being a principal?
Difficult. As an associate, it's nothing's your problem. You know, you come in and you do your job and you go home and you think, well, I've earned decent money today, I've sorted my patients out. And that's your main focus, it's the patient. You're always focusing on that patient in your chair. Whereas as a principal, everything in that business is your problem. Like, you have all these things, all these hats now that you have to start wearing. I'm very fortunate. I've got a really, really good practice manager. I've got a great treatment coordinator. I've got my wife on reception. I've got an amazing team of dental nurses. But it's still so many different things that you just don't even think about are going to be your problem. Like, you know, yesterday the computer stopped working. I've got the back of the computer off and I have no idea what I'm doing here. But that's not going to fix itself. You've got to fix it. But also, I guess, like, the time, like, you go home now and my brain's constantly thinking about that practice.
How do you feel your skill set's changed? So obviously from being an associate to being a principal, you know, if people are listening to this and thinking about going into practice ownership, what are the key things that they could be looking at?
Just listening and interpersonal skills. I did a few courses and I've read a few books on, like, people management and things like that. And it's just like listening and just being empathetic to people, I guess, being sort of strict but fair. You want to create this environment where people can kind of thrive and flourish. And beforehand, you just literally turned up, did your job and go home, you know? So all of a sudden, like, everyone looks to you to, like, give them guidance. What should we do? Like, it's almost like a duck, isn't it, on the water? You've got, like, this duck above the water that's just sort of all serene and the legs underneath the surface are going like 1,000,000 miles an hour. So it is very much like that. Like, you just got to keep a level head. That's probably one of the main things. It's just keeping calm, but also, like, learning how to communicate effectively with people. It's so important.
Yeah, no, 100%. Communication is one of the biggest skills that anybody can have. Doesn't matter what profession that you're in, whether it's dentistry or not, but you've got to be able to communicate with your team and also be able to lead them effectively. And so obviously you've grown your team pretty substantially in a very short space of time. And I think you're close to, what, 4 surgeries now?
Yeah, so
less than a year?
I remember when we started and, like, I had a team picture. I think Bobby and some of the guys, like, flipping out, your team is massive. Like, why have you got so many people working for you? I think we started with 9 or 10. I think I did kind of go into it probably fairly confident. I was thinking, I'm probably going to do all right at this. So I did have a bigger team probably than you need to. I think it's better just to get everyone singing from the same hymn sheet early than trying to retrospectively train everybody. When I did start, I remember one time Bobby said, the team you start with will not be the team you finish with after a year. And I was like, well, they're rubbish. I'm definitely going to have the same team. I don't have the same team as when I started. It's not necessarily to say because there's been an issue or anything's gone wrong. It's just people do come and go. One of my old bosses, one of his pieces of advice was, you've got to think of life as a bus. People will get on and people will get off, and you've just got to enjoy them while they're there. And that kind of always stuck with me. You don't want them to go, obviously, and you're upset about it. You've got to be grateful for the time that you spent with them. Yeah,
and hopefully with what we're doing in Squat Success and learning more and more, we're hoping that the team that you start with might actually be the team that is still there within 12 months.
That's the challenge, the first person to have the same team in 12 months.
We could have an award ceremony for Squat Success. Obviously within dentistry, people talk about there's a massive recruitment crisis, everybody's struggling to get nurses, staff, team members. How did you find that when you were setting up the practice in terms of recruitment, and what was your kind of method?
It might not have been a normal experience because, again, I did kind of leverage my social media quite a lot, and I managed to kind of create quite a lot of hype around the fact that we were opening a dental practice in the local area. We had, like, a big, QR code on the door. I had a practice Instagram account set up, and people were already quite excited about that. And then when we did put a recruitment post on, we had so many people applying for jobs. And then I remember, like, just sitting there, just looking through CVs, like, how am I going to shortlist this for interview?
Was that through social media?
Yeah. So we didn't advertise on Indeed or anything. We just put a post on Instagram. We had so many CVs just popping up, wanting to come. Oh, it's so exciting, I want to work for you.
Which again speaks to the power of having personal brand.
Like, people coming in, we're interviewing, like, oh my God, that person's amazing. We were so lucky. And I still do think to this day, the team I have are amazing. I'm so lucky to have that. I don't think I would have had that if I wouldn't have had that kind of initial pull of social media.
So how's things going at Bank Dental at the moment? Where are you up to?
It's been crazy this year. So we set up with 2 surgeries. We did the 3rd room. We just got the builders to rip everything out because we were almost like, I can't keep up here. Then I got an associate who is also absolutely amazing. I was very lucky to have such a good associate. She does a lot of our general dentistry. Patients love her. Now we're at the point where I've just put the builders in and paid the deposit for a 4th surgery. I used a company to do my loan application because I got a part loan out to obviously finance the squat, and I put my application in, and the guy who did my business plan, I remember him commenting on it going, Matt's put this forecast in and these figures are very kind of adventurous. I was talking about like £800,000 gross over the year. We've over doubled that in the first year. We're nearly about 1.7 million turnover.
Yeah, so it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
So as I said, that's probably, within the 0.001% of, most practices that open. But, one of the things that I see is there's just so many different things that have enabled you to do that. Personal brand, obviously, that's one aspect. And obviously that's been a huge asset to yourself. One of the second things is just your attitude to the way you take things on. You were one of the people in Squat Success who kind of got this whole thing done as quick as possible. There was no messing around. But I think your attitude and your mindset and the way you applied that towards it, and the way you're still continually applying that into the business at the moment, all of that adds to how successful that you've been.
We were talking earlier, it becomes a difficulty though where like you do almost become quite obsessed with it, and you're like, oh, this is going so well, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to keep working, and you do need to kind of pull yourself back from it a little bit. I mean, I'm at that point now, and we've spoken about this already. I've got a young family. I do 2 late nights on a Tuesday, Wednesday, so I start at 8:30, finish at 7. I was working clinically like 5 days a week, and I did a full 52 weeks in the year without a week off. It was mental, and I look back on it, and as an associate, I was always like, I'm on holiday. In that first year, I was just like, almost like in a spin class. Like I was absolutely going for it. And then it becomes quite difficult to then just like take it down a gear, I guess. You've got to take it off yourself and start thinking about, well, I'm going to utilize that room or that surgery for someone else, which is a difficult thing because like when it is yours and like you are wanting to run it as like the captain, it's hard to sort of let go a little bit. And I'm finding that's the point I'm at now. I'm finding it quite difficult.
Yeah, and I think that's a big problem amongst all dentists, myself included. My team are here today and they will quite happily tell you about how hard it is to let go. So when you're growing something from scratch, it's yours, it's your baby, you've put your lifeblood into it, and then all of a sudden you have to put your trust in other people to take some of that weight off you. But as we were saying earlier, unless you learn to do that, you can't grow. And ultimately you'll end up putting yourself, in an early deathbed because you will just work yourself to the ground. Yeah. In our nature, we are control freaks because of the clinical work and the nature of the work that we do. So I think we find it a little bit harder. But then also, once you've got the right people, it becomes a little bit easier and you can start passing that on. You
don't necessarily have to be there, but you have all the tools at your disposal to check, which again, it's a really, really powerful thing to have at your fingertips. But again, it's difficult not to become obsessive with that. It's hard because you're trying to deliver a certain level of service and consistently do it, and you just don't want to drop the ball. And the key thing as well with like new businesses is like reviews and word of mouth and Google reviews. Like you just don't want like anyone to go, I know what, I went to that practice and I had a really bad experience there. So you do want to carry on delivering that service, but you've got to just think the more you teach people and the more you get them in tune with your way of thinking, the more like they're going to do that without you having to do it and be there. So you've got to just let go, and it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. So once you reach your 4 surgeries, what's next?
I'm going to sail off into the Caribbean. No, I'm joking. No, I don't know. I would like to probably cut down to probably 3 days clinical. I'd like to get another dentist in, maybe touching a bit onto what I do. So when you do have a personal brand already, you really, really like lean on that to set a practice up. So like people are coming in because they want to come and see you. So you have to then try and stop that. You have to then go, right, okay, let's build the practice instead. And then it's not so much about me, it's about the practice and the experience of the dental practice. They could be seeing any dentist in the practice and they're going to get this same level of experience.
Do you find that's a problem? So if patients come in off the back of your social media media.
If they don't specifically want to see me, or did not ask, I want to see, because if I've done someone's teeth, I want to go and see the person who's done the teeth, then that becomes a bit of difficulty. But where we get a lot of new patients and a lot of inquiries, just general inquiries, they get Gemma, our associate, and everyone says to me, like, Gemma is basically like a female dentist version of you. I've got so much confidence knowing that she's going to look after that patient just as I wanted to. But again, you've got to just pick the right team, and you've got to just make sure you pick the right associates. I have just been very, very lucky in that regard. And I think sometimes you just got to leave them alone a little bit just to see how they get on, taking like a little peep every now and again just to check everything's okay. It's something that you're not used to as an associate. You're just used to working in the practice. You're not thinking about the other dentists in that practice, nothing to do with you.
So I think for me personally, one of the scariest parts after having the practice up and running was taking an associate dentist, because all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, it's not me anymore. Are they going to treat the patient the same? Are they going to do the same things that I would? Are they going to speak to them the same way that I would? Are they going to get the same level of care? Because that's my practice, that's the way I've set this up. And that is really, really scary when it happens for the first time. But ultimately, we can find people who fit with our culture. Dentists can be trained, they can learn how we do things. Not everybody will be a right fit, but it's good to identify that prior to bringing them in.
Now is a really good time, like before you have developed a practice, just try and nail down like, what are you about? Like, what is your culture? What's your vision? What's your mission? It might sound a bit corny and stuff, but if you just write on a piece of paper, what's your vision for your dental practice? What's your mission? What you're trying to achieve? It's so easy just to keep referring back to it. You've got it on a piece of paper and you think, well, that doesn't really tie in with our vision. That doesn't really tie in with our mission. That doesn't tie with our culture. Before you start a practice, just think about that and really have like a good opportunity just to nail that down.
Yeah, so knowing all of that makes you make decisions better, easier and quicker. Does this decision align with my vision, my values, what we're doing with the practice, yes or no? Rather than having it lingering for a long time afterwards. A couple of final things. So first one is for everybody who's in the room today thinking about setting up a practice or going into practice ownership, what are your top 3 tips? 3 things that they can do right now.
So invest in yourself, invest and spend time developing your own personal skill set, showcase it, and then also ask people to tell people about it. You take some photos, give them to the patient. Someone singing your praises is so valuable. Someone sits down, they already have trust in you because you've spent time sorting their mate's teeth out, they've seen the work. I mean, just the personal touches, like we had someone write a Google review the other day, like, oh, I can't believe when I finish my consultation, they bring you down to the reception personally and hand you over to the reception. Like the dentist does that, I've never had that before. So just making it a personalised experience for that patient is so important. The other one is just sitting and just listening to people. Just sit down and let someone talk. Because there's a amount of times I get someone for a consultation, I just sit there, take some photos, stick them on the screen and just sit and listen. What don't you like, or what do you want to achieve? And then if you get into that mindset of you just aiming to help that person overcome these barriers and what they want to achieve, they instantly like you. And then just looking again at like team and just getting yourself a really good close-knit team group behind you. I remember someone saying to me, just keep the small things small and the big things big. And most things in life are always small. And there was one video I remember Adrian sent to me. I was really in a really low place with it, and he sent me this clip of this guy, and he was just doing a podcast, and he just said, hopefully you never get to this point, but he was saying like hatred is like a requisite to success. If you aren't getting hated, then you're not going to be successful, because not everybody is going to be singing or happy that you're doing this, but you just have to not let that get to you, which is really, really difficult. We are human, of course. If something like that happens, you do focus on it, but you've got to just focus on the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is your practice taking off. And then if you do get in that situation, you've got someone who will just fight your corner. We're in a great community where you're supported. People want you to do well in this group. So being part of that it's worth everything. It's priceless, isn't it?
Yeah, no, 100% I agree. The power of the community is massive. The support network that you get off the back of it. So when I look back on my journey, doing it all alone, it was horrific. I went through a lot of hardship when I opened my practice for a lot of different reasons. It was very unpleasant, and I didn't have any of this. I didn't have community, I didn't have people, support network. Whatever happened, it was a good thing, because otherwise I would never be doing, what I do today. Brilliant. Matt is probably one of the most humble people that you will ever meet. So he has absolutely no ego. There's a huge amount of value, you can extract from Matt over the next day or so while he's still here with us. We'll wrap it up here. So can we all give Matt a massive round of applause, please? Thank you.